If you need immediate help, please call the National Substance Abuse and Mental Health Hotline at 1-800-662-HELP.
Bottle of wine, fruit of the vine. When you gonna let me get sober? Let me go home and start over.
Welcome to Clean and Sober Radio, brought to you in part by Jefferson University Hospitals and Thomas Jefferson University, providing excellent clinical and compassionate care in the Philadelphia region, a proven leader in healthcare and education since 1825. And now, here are your hosts, Gary Hendler and Mark Sigmund.
Hey, hi, everybody, and thanks for joining the show. Clean and Sober Radio features real people with real stories about addiction to drugs and alcohol. Our phone number here is 1-888-728-9941. Call us. Let us know how Clean and Sober Radio can help you or a loved one get into sobriety. Mark, what is new this week in recovery news?
So I have an interesting camping hiking trip to tell you about. This comes out of the Cascade Mountains in the Adirondacks in New York State. A 911 call was made and to a forest ranger who responded to this 911 call about a reportedly deceased hiker after the pair called that a third member of their hiking party had died and that they were lost. Before the ranger arrived to find the group, they met a summit steward whose job is to stand at the top of the mountain to ensure the conservation of sensitive alpine habitat is protected. The two stewards had told them that they were lost, and it turned out that they had been taking hallucinogenic mushrooms. They thought that the other person that got lost in their group, they were all tripping. Basically, the first two that lost the other one called 911. The lost hiker called 911, and the two thought the other one had died. I mean, talk about a bad trip. So the police actually ended up taking two of them to the emergency room, and the other one was actually allowed to continue hiking. But it sounds like a really strange story. It was in the BBC. It was actually all over world news about these magic mushrooms.
Yeah, you know what it sounds like to me?
I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, that's an interesting look. If it's true, it's crazy.
It's
and if
true.
it's not true, it's crazy.
Absolutely.
Mark, we touched on this last week, this drug called Durnavex,
Nice.
which is a pain medication which goes directly to the pain, not to the brain first, to manage the pain. And it's pretty interesting stuff.
It is, because what's interesting about it is we have this blood-brain barrier that when you have drugs that are intoxicating, they cross the blood-brain barrier. This particular drug actually hits the receptor sites right in the body without crossing the blood-brain barrier, so there's no intoxicating effects. Now, what they're saying is it's not as effective as something like Percocet, but it's pretty close, and they're starting to, really see some promise in this pretty expensive drug at this point.
So is this drug good for certain levels of pain?
Yes. I mean, I don't think you'll see this drug for post-surgery.
Right.
This is more for people that are having knee pain and, different pains that's not severe.
Right.
Like I said, it's still new. It's $15.50 a pill right now.
Yeah,
so
$15.50 a
which
pill.
actually doesn't sound that bad for a brand new drug, right?
Yeah, but you can't get high on it.
You can't get high on it, yes.
Right.
But I would love to see them somehow phase out a lot of these really intense painkillers that people are getting hooked to.
Yeah. It's really interesting.
It
I
is.
never thought about blocking the pain from where the pain is instead of going to your brain first.
Yeah, it's fascinating. A lot of research went into this, and it looks promising.
Great. That's great news. Anyway, we have a great show coming up. We have an expert. I'm not going to mention his name yet. We have an expert on the opioid crisis on all parts of law enforcement, education, teaching. So when we come back, we're going to introduce a friend of the show and a good friend of mine. We'll be right back.
This is Clean and Sober Radio.
A cancer diagnosis can knock the wind out of you. The Sidney Kimmel Cancer Center at Abington Jefferson Health can help. Our brand new Asplund Cancer Pavilion brings you 86,000 square feet of cancer-fighting science for truly comprehensive care. Backed by the strength of an NCI-designated cancer center. Call 1-800-JEFF now. The Sidney Kimmel Cancer Center at Abington Jefferson Health. The power to out-science cancer.
What's happening? Brandon Novak here from Those Movies Jacks, or author of that addiction memoir, Dream Seller. Do me a favor and tune into Clean and Sober Radio with Gary Hendler.
888-728-9941. This is Clean and Sober Radio.
You can always enjoy and be educated on Clean and Sober Radio on these radio stations. WWDB in Philadelphia, WPEN 97.5, High Def 2 in Philadelphia, WGAC in Augusta, Georgia, NJBR in Tampa, Florida, and above, and also there are plenty more.
Well, I'm not bragging, babe, so don't put me down. But I've got the fastest set of wheels in town.
So that song has absolutely nothing to do with this show, but I wanted to play because I'm feeling summer-like now, you know?
Well, this is just our age difference here because holy 1950s or 1960s.
No.
Oh my gosh, these 90s guys and 2000s that are out there are like, what is this stuff? But it was the Beach Boys, right?
Mark, I'm surprised that you got that.
It was the Beach Boys.
Can you name one Beach Boy?
No.
Okay. Anyway,
No.
that song has nothing to do with the show, but our guest, Steve Forzato, has everything to do with this show. He is an expert in the opioid epidemic. He has served as a consultant to the Pennsylvania Attorney General's investigation of pharmaceutical manufacturers and oversaw investigations involving unlawful prescribing, on and on and on. He now, he is, carrying on his tradition. He is the director for the Center for Addiction and Recovery Education at St. Joe's University in Philadelphia. That is a big deal. Steve is also involved in, and we're going to get into this, the subject of sex trafficking, which is a big, big deal, and nobody thinks it goes on in their neighborhoods, but it goes on almost in every neighborhood, and we're going to get into that, and we're just glad to have you with us, Steve. Welcome to the show.
Gary, thank you. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Steve.
Did I do okay? Did I introduce you all right?
You did pretty well, yeah.
Okay, that's good. That's good. So, well, we got a lot to talk about here. Give us a little background. Where did you start off in law enforcement?
Sure. I started, my first day was February 10th, 1986. And yes, I did listen to music from the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. Yeah. So, I started out in law enforcement at the Montgomery County District Attorney's Office here in Pennsylvania. I was an investigator, then promoted to detective. I found my niche when I joined the narcotics enforcement team. And Gary, I worked undercover for the next 28 years. I've essentially a PhD on street knowledge.
Are you allowed to mention the name you used? Or
Yeah,
not?
absolutely. Tony Rendazzo was my undercover name for most of my operations.
Fits so
Is that
well.
great? He looks like a
I
Tony.
mean, doesn't that fit?
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So I bought guns, I bought drugs, I bought. I engaged in human trafficking investigations and went undercover on them, and so after decades of doing that work, I thought, what else can I do after essentially, Gary, lying about my identity for 33 years, right? What am I qualified to do? And I thought, let me educate others. Let me educate the public.
Yeah.
Let me educate my former colleagues in the police departments, in the district attorney's offices, about certain types of investigations that I found personally critically important for my understanding of the world.
Steve, when you started out doing this, did you get pushback from your colleagues? Like, I don't want to deal with that. Those junkies,
totally.
Who cares? Did you get that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so we'll get to the topic at hand, but when it came to drug investigations, back when I started, 1980s, 1990s, it was very popular. And so a lot of elected district attorneys love good drug cases. And then, the public and, people got a little tired of the cases and the piles of drugs and guns that were on display at press conferences. Yeah. And it just seemed to go, cyclical. And so when I discovered what human trafficking was and actually met the victims of human trafficking, that was like a reprieve from the pressure of doing narcotics work. And I began to learn something new about our society.
And let me just say something. So, if whoever's listening, or they're saying, what does sex trafficking have to do with addiction? It has everything to do with addiction.
Absolutely. So first of all, human traffickers, they like to play upon the vulnerabilities of people, of human beings, and certainly, particularly women, when it comes to sex trafficking. And so, if they come across someone that has a substance use problem, there's a vulnerability they can easily exploit. It doesn't take rocket science to manipulate somebody who's needs to use 10, 20 bags of heroin a day, or has an alcohol problem. And so, so they play to those vulnerabilities. And as we'll discuss, I think, and the audience would probably resonate, it would resonate with the audience, but a human trafficker, if they demand, let's say, $1,000 a day from their employee, their sex worker, and that employee doesn't meet that mark, that handler could withhold drugs, mostly opioids, mostly heroin, could withhold as a punishment, and then reward that person if they do meet that mark. And so that's the way they sort of coerce their client, their employees.
Steve, what is the difference, or where's the threshold between a pimp and their prostitute and human trafficking?
Sure. So the term pimp was, very popular when I started, and then it made more sense to use some other terms because the idea that one would have in their head a well-dressed, pimp, bright clothing, Superfly. Yeah, that really didn't happen very much. I mean, it happened in some places, but the handlers, and sometimes they refer to themselves as husbands of their employees, or handlers. They can be of any type, any sort, any socioeconomic, racial background. They dress just like you and I, and so they look at this as a business, a way to make money, fast cash, non-taxed income, preying upon the vulnerabilities of their employees, and then obviously taking advantage of the public. Who there are people that have an interest in paying for sex.
Is there a specific charge for human trafficking?
Yes, it wasn't that way decades ago. Prostitution was essentially the charge, which sort of focused on the female, let's say. But they also had charges like houses of prostitution. So if they engaged in a business where they had an apartment or a house that engaged in that activity, there was that. And then, of course, the Johns, as we called them, the customers of the prostitutes had their own set of charges. But human trafficking investigations evolved, and there was a realization among the public and the legislature that this is actually a crime of enslavement. So enslaving people to do commercial sex work became a crime in all states eventually. And, of course, the federal government led the way.
Are the women, mainly it's women who are trafficked, are they charged?
So on most occasions, they are. About 77% of commercial sex workers, according to research, are women. So you're correct on that. And oftentimes they are charged. However, sort of a modern way to view this based on research, based on interviews I've done and so many others have done, these women are actually forced into this type of activity. So on most occasions, it's really appropriate to not charge and use their experience as witnesses in court as opposed to defendants.
It seems to me it's almost like an addiction. The user shouldn't really be charged. The dealer should be charged. And this is almost the same kind of thing. I mean,
well, I think I understand your question. It's correct. It should be the person that's profiting from and handling the people and coercing them and forcing them to hotels to engage in commercial sex, to profit. Yeah, absolutely. The most culpability should be on the handler.
Right, right. So, Steve, this is in every state, obviously, and probably in every major city. You just concentrate. Is it in Pennsylvania or actually in Montgomery County?
Yeah. So in my Montgomery County career, I obviously focused on Montgomery County. However, my investigations through those years included work in Philadelphia, New Jersey, New York. And so we were able to rescue the women involved in these prostitution rings from the tri state area.
Right. I just want to clarify for our audience. Montgomery County is a county that touches Philadelphia County, so that's where it is. It's portrayed a lot as a very affluent county, but it is, and it's also there are parts that are very poor.
Oh, yeah. We have these towns where people are very challenged economically.
Yeah.
Right next to towns where there are mansions that would rival what we see in Europe.
Right.
And so,
Within
yeah.
5 minutes.
Oh, with 5 minutes, yeah.
5 minutes away. So, do you have a team? How do you do this? I mean, I think it's so cool. Here's why I love you. You know that. But first you were in law enforcement. You were against. You were going after people, and now your life has really become helping people.
Yeah, I advocate for the victims of
Yeah.
both substance use disorder as well as human trafficking and the victims of gun violence. All of those folks, I think throughout my career, I always wanted to do that type of work, and sometimes I was able to do it that way. But I had a job to do. I had a job to make the public safe, and arresting people made sense on most of my cases.
But you told me a story a couple years ago about a person, I guess it was in Harrisburg somewhere, who had a bad drug addiction. Can you tell the audience that story? I think it just shows your character.
Thank you, Gary. Yeah. So it was a Friday afternoon. I had just left a meeting with the Pennsylvania Department of Health, and they had shared something new to me, which is actually decades old, but that 1-800-662-4357 helpline, it's been around since the 1980s. And
Really?
so they shared at this meeting how that number could connect people to treatment services from all over the country. And so anyway, I went to that meeting and I heard about this number, and they were throwing stats at me and how effective it is. And I didn't really think so at the time. I thought, well, this is another federal program that maybe works, maybe doesn't work. So I left the meeting. I gassed up my state car. I was an attorney general agent. And while gassing up my car, there was a young man, very emaciated, about 20 years old. And it certainly appeared to me, after decades of working the streets, that he had an opioid addiction, a heroin addiction. And he held a little sign that asked for money. And so when I finished up, I drove up to him, rolled my window down, and I said, "Can I have a conversation with you? You mind talking to me?" And he said, "Sure." So I drove through the parking lot. He followed me, and we had a talk. And it turned out that, yes, he admitted to me he had a heroin addiction. He was starting to Jones because he hadn't shut up since that morning, that Friday morning. And I said, "Have you ever thought about getting out? Have you ever thought about treatment?" He goes, "Yeah, I went to treatment before." And I said, "Well, congratulations. That's great that you went before. That was a big step. But, are you ready to take that step again? And if you are, can I help you?" And he said, "Sure." I said, "Well, I just left a meeting," and I pointed to the Department of Health building. I said, "I left a meeting from that building, and I'd like to call a number that they suggested works." And I called the number. And
With him next to you?
yes, he was just sitting outside or standing outside my car, leaning in. And I called 1-800-662-4357, and an incredible person answered the phone. I explained the situation. I'm in a gas station in Harrisburg. And I said, "Would you be willing to talk to this young man that's outside my car?" And absolutely. They had about a 30-minute conversation. Mark, I listened at how great she had these intervention skills that I wish I had when I started law enforcement. And she really engaged him. And sure enough, she was able to talk this person, guide this person into treatment. And the very next morning, a white van picked up this unhoused Harrisburg person addicted to opioids, picked that person up at 8 o'clock the next morning. I got a text from him and said, "Hey, a white van just showed up. I'm in the van." And Gary, I was so happy. And he got into detox, about a 7-day detox. His addiction was very strong. and then he got into treatment following that detox period. Isn't that incredible?
It's absolutely incredible. Just to have that kind of, to have run into this where you heard about the number, then you get to see it actually work right
Mark,
in front
it
of
worked.
you.
It worked
Yeah.
then. It worked so many times after. I still use that number when I don't have a treatment center in mind right away. And I still use that number in various circumstances.
Yeah, they're very well trained to that 1-800-662-HELP. Whatever happened to that guy, do you know?
So he actually, I got a hold of him about a year and a half later. I found him back on the streets. So he had ended up reusing again, but he had that about a year of sobriety, reconnected with his family, and then unfortunately, as it happens, people do return to using. And so, the honest report on the story, remember, I lied for my whole life. I'll give you the honest report on this. I was undercover for so many years, but he ended up reusing, and it's a lesson. It's people do find it very difficult, to remain sober, after a long time of using.
And also, many people do get sober also. We tend to talk about a lot of the negative, and there is plenty of negative, but there are a lot of good numbers also. If you're just joining us now, Steve Forzato is our guest. He is an expert in the opioid, I could say, situation in every aspect of it. And if you want to give a call and talk to Steve, there's a good opportunity. Give us a call at 1-888-728-9941, 1-888-728-9941. And we have a list, Mark, already of people that that are watching the show. Let me start, then you can go, right?
All right. Sounds good.
Kathy Wolf Collins from Coral Springs, Florida. Judge Christopher R. Maddox from Drexel Hill, Pennsylvania. One of our two favorite judges, right?
Yes.
James Bilderback from Ventnor, New Jersey. He and Nancy are from Ventnor, New Jersey. Great broadcast as usual. And I'll see you over the weekend, Jim. Robert Brandis, we must get together soon. Wishing you all good things. Greetings from Shanksville, Pennsylvania. So, Steve, I say it all right?
Shanksville.
Shank.
Is it?
Like
No,
like shank, like a shank.
I pronounce it like you, Gary.
Mike Burke from Media, Pennsylvania. Laura Story. I'm here from Winter Haven, Florida. It's been raining since last week.
Wow.
Have a blessed weekend. Love the show, guys. Betsy Kalish. Greetings. Debbie Reynolds. There's so many in here. Steve, you have drawn the people out of the woodwork. Jim Meehan. Who do you got?
I got all your people, Gary.
All right, you got Jim Meehan.
I got Jim Meehan, 5-year anniversary. He's in terms of his attendance at our radio show.
Oh, well, that
5
deserves
years.
it.
Yep. But I find this whole thing fascinating. I don't know. We're about to take a break here, but
We have 2 minutes. Go
2
ahead.
minutes. Okay,
Yeah.
I have this backing up to the human trafficking thing. One thing that comes to mind is, do a lot of these women get basically imported from overseas?
Yeah.
And I heard there's different ports that they come in, and then there's all, people, I mean, it's like a whole sale kind of thing. Is it almost like slavery? Is that what you're seeing or hearing? Or?
Absolutely. That's a big part of it. It's not the only part, however. There are, people that are Americans that grew up and were born and raised here in the Philadelphia area in America that have been human trafficked, oftentimes because of, tough family situations and also substance use disorder. But as you're aware, I mean, there's a lot of people, millions that have crossed the border into the United States, and they owe money to what we call coyotes, or those that have hustled them across the border. And so, how do you pay those debts? So commercial sex trafficking, as well as labor trafficking, forced labor trafficking, are used to pay those debts.
Well, that's people say, well, how come these women just don't run away? It's not like that, man. It's they do this because their lives, they need that to live.
Well, and if any town you pass all these massage parlors everywhere in any town in America, it seems like. And, I guess that's part of the whole trafficking.
Yeah, we have to take another quick break, guys. When we come back, we're with Steve Forzato, expert in the subject of addiction, human trafficking, everything. We'll be right back. I got this.
This is Clean and Sober Radio.
A cancer diagnosis can knock the wind out of you. The Sidney Kimmel Cancer Center at Abington Jefferson Health can help. Our brand new Asplund Cancer Pavilion brings you 86,000 square feet of cancer-fighting science for truly comprehensive care. Backed by the strength of an NCI-designated cancer center. Call 1-800-JEFF now. The Sidney Kimmel Cancer Center at Abington Jefferson Health. The power to out-science cancer.
Hey, this is Mark Stein from the classic rock band Vanilla Fudge. Keep on rocking, so good luck to everybody and all the best.
888-728-9941. This is Clean and Sober Radio.
Hey, we're back. Clean and Sober Radio out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We're with Steve Forzato, expert, a real expert, law enforcement, education, everything, opioid. The subject matter is addiction and human trafficking. And, it's like people think that addiction doesn't happen in their neighborhoods, I don't, whether it's an upscale neighborhood, human trafficking, Steve's been teaching me, can be anywhere. And it's, it's, just think if it was your sister, your daughter, your mother, it's pretty horrible.
Well, and the thing is that I've heard, okay, and again, as an addictions counselor and stuff, is that there is brothels blowing up around the United States right now, and that there may be a move towards legalization. Have you heard that kind of thing?
Not so much the chatter about legalization, but my hypothesis is that because of the border crossings, I believe that sex trafficking is probably a lot higher than it was when I started back in the 1980s. I just think there's a lot of people that are being trafficked to pay off the price of crossing the border. And so by fraud, by coercion, they're employed in this fashion, forced to do this type of work. And then obviously addictions, right? That plays into it as well. And so I think the activity is much higher than it used to be, but we'll learn that as we begin to educate. We're going to begin educating hotel staff on the signs of human trafficking and how to report signs of human trafficking. It's one thing to call 911, and certainly everyone should in an emergency, but if a crime requires an investigation, we want to see detectives, agents, investigators look at this and determine, is this activity drug activity or is it prostitution / human trafficking?
Madeline is on the line. Welcome to Clean and Sober Radio.
Thanks. Hey, guys. Great show. Steve, I had a question for you. Someone mentioned earlier on part of your role includes or did include educating law enforcement. And I'm curious, over time, what that experience was like. Are the agencies receptive, and what that sort of programming looks like, and what that experience has been like for you? Because I think getting the message out to those who aren't personally exposed to experiences is just so critical.
That's a great question. Yeah, it's so the education has really been critical in getting law enforcement to understand what addiction is and what it's not. Just like any professional that's engaged with the public, it's very tough at times. You get tired of the insults and you get tired of the behavior. But once we educate on addiction, on why people continue to use, despite knowing the harm of a substance, the brain science of addiction, it seems to really hit that stigma that many have about addiction. So I could tell you that over the past 5 years at St. Joe's, we educated about 8,000 first responders in 43 states. And I can tell you there's a difference in 5 years. Police officers, prosecutors, they're all better understanding substance use disorder. It started in 2017 when naloxone became available to police officers. Remember, EMS had it for decades. However, a police officer would roll up on a medical emergency in like 1990, see an overdose, and have to wait for an ambulance. Now they have Narcan on their tool belt, in the trunk of their car, and they're able to save lives. That in 2017 started to make a difference, and I see education as critical to keep them on that trajectory. Learn about addiction, learn how to connect people to treatment, as opposed to always connecting somebody to jail. So yes, I think there's been a good market change in that.
As they say, we can't incarcerate out of this situation. We see on television a lot the phone number in Jersey or Pennsylvania. If you have drug problem, blah 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 blah. Are there any numbers out there that say, listen, if you or a loved one has been affected by human trafficking, here is a number to call?
So we are, there's a national hotline. There are state resources in every state to take those calls. As we develop this program, we're going to be putting out a particular phone number for people to call here in Pennsylvania, and then we'll research the other states. But there is a particular phone number in Pennsylvania to the Pennsylvania Crime Information Center, or PASIC, and I'll share that number in just a little bit.
Sure.
But it's an intelligence group. It's state government. They take calls 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All of the call takers are trained in human trafficking and how to ask the right questions. Most importantly, that information is then forwarded to the state police, who are trained and equipped to do these investigations in collaboration with local police.
Right. Madeline, thank you very much for calling in.
Thanks for calling.
Thanks.
I find this, Steve, really sad but fascinating. It almost feels to me like the beginning of at least when I became aware of, after I came out of my fog, addiction, what it really meant. I think there's probably so many people that don't even know what human trafficking is, first of all, and don't believe or whatever that it's in their neighborhood. And how do you know if it's in your neighborhood?
Yeah. Well, I think the normal person may not recognize the signs, but there are people in positions that see things because of their employment. And so let's say hotel, motel work.
Yeah.
If you're an employee of a hotel and you work maintenance, where you're going around fixing plumbing problems in the rooms, or you're fixing lights, or if you're housekeeping and you're in the rooms, you see the activity on the floor because you're there all day, right? I mean, you're there for your whole shift, going from room to room. Or you're the front desk person that is checking people in and having conversations with people, and there's some instinct in you says there's something wrong about this. And then all of a sudden there's a lot of traffic in and out of that room, of mostly men coming and going. And so all of that activity, and as I said, I wanted to share the number to report it here in Pennsylvania.
Sure.
But we're going to work on this and make sure this number gets into everybody's hands that are in positions to see this. And it's 1-888-292-1919. And so, reporting this to police and then making sure that the police are trained and equipped to do these investigations, to conduct surveillance, to do interviews of let's say, the customers that are leaving the rooms. Those are really critical skills that police need to have. And then when arrests are made, search warrants are conducted, arrests are made, prosecutions are worked on, treating the victims as they are victims, making sure that they get access to professional treatment, trauma-informed care, making sure shelter and those basic human needs are taken care of while you're focused on prosecuting the most culpable, the handlers, the business people behind it.
See, where would somebody get treatment for this? For addiction, there's so many rehabs around. Is it private treatment, or how does it work?
Yeah, so, when you think about it.
Or county? Is there county?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Counties have the ability to refer people to treatment centers that, everybody has their own needs. And so let's say all I have is a heroin addiction. There's no trauma in my life. I just got addicted because I wanted to play around and try it, and I can't stop. A treatment center, probably any treatment center could help me. But if I'm somebody with a lot of trauma, if I'm somebody that was coerced into criminal behavior for a year, 5 years, I'm going to need not only substance use treatment, I'm going to need trauma treatment for my trauma. Otherwise, I'll return to use. The day I get out, that trauma is still in my head, and my behavior is going to exhibit the desire to use, and we need to treat the trauma.
Yeah, I mean, you'll get a young woman that'll come in, they've been hooked on crack cocaine, and they have not only the trauma of being hooked, but the trauma of a lot of times prostitution, a trauma of sex crimes happening against them. And when you really dig, there's that guilt and shame. They come out of the fog of addiction, and then they're like, "Oh my gosh, what did I do?" And it's really sad. But I imagine one of the complicating factors now is like a lot of the, I'm sure, human trafficking is non-documented immigrants, right?
Yes.
So it's like they get caught. It's not like you can send them for treatment right then, right?
No, you can. So
You can.
absolutely, these are victims of crimes.
Okay.
Just like a witness to a crime. So let's just think about it common sense wise. If I drive out of here and I get crashed into by, let's say, a car, and it's a DUI related crash and I'm severely injured, and there's a witness to that crash that's important for testimony later in court. If that person's undocumented, law enforcement has a way to keep that person in the country legally so that they can perform their civic duty of testifying. So in my case, when I did human trafficking cases, there were women that came from other countries. My first case was in 1990. They were 2 Chinese citizens brought nefariously across the border from Canada to the U.S. All of their papers were taken, and they were forced into working at a massage parlor. And those 2 Chinese women, once we figured out what this was all about, I was able to work with federal authorities to let them stay here in the United States, get help, get treatment, get support, and they became terrific witnesses. But they also, it gave them a ticket to the United States. And their substance use issues were solved through professional treatment. The trauma was dealt with, and they became really great citizens of the United States later on after they went through a process.
Did you ever see families involved in this, like 2 sisters, a mother and a daughter?
Yeah, and that happens a lot, I'm told, overseas. And so that's one of the things we're going to explore. There are some cultures where this happens more than others, and their children are even not valued in some cases. I would say hopefully rare cases. But Gary, we're going to find out. Yeah. You and I will be exposed to this as we engage in this work together.
Yeah, Mark, the number that Steve just gave, and he'll give again, we should also put that in our repertoire for our numbers: the suicide hotline, the drug hotline. So, and we're gonna, Steve, you'll have a platform here for this stuff. You know what
Beautiful,
I mean?
Gary.
Do you know a Bill Cutruff?
Yeah.
Well, he says, "Yo, Steve, good to hear you. Keep up the great work."
Yeah, Bill's a great supporter of our work, and he actually assists us at our work at St. Joe's. Yeah.
Okay.
St. Joe's grad.
That's
Thanks,
awesome.
Bill.
That's great. Stephen Sussman from Stephen, where are you from in Florida? Palm Beach? Where is it?
Palm Beach Gardens.
Is that what it says here?
Yes, Palm Beach Gardens.
Yeah.
And we got C. Ruger.
We do have C. Ruger. And we have Judge Maddox 12 times on here.
Yeah, he must have had a connection issue. I've seen that happen before, too.
Hey, Max G, we get emails during the week, okay? Max G from Philadelphia. Most people do not use drugs and alcohol to excess. What's the big deal? Well, buddy,
I was gonna,
keep listening.
I was going to kick that question right back to you.
I knew you were. I knew you were. Sherry K., St. George, Utah. Thank goodness for your show and for the resources to help those in addiction. I received treatment 9 years ago today.
Phenomenal. That's great news.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, that's good. It's good. Steve, is it hard for you when you're with the Attorney General's office, and do you take this stuff home with you? I mean, this stuff really is disturbing.
It is. I could tell you there were days and nights where I would park my car in my driveway and just turn the engine off and just sit.
Really?
Yeah, and just sit and reflect on my day, what I witnessed. Oh my goodness, Gary, the homicides, the suicides that I had to
Yeah.
endure,
How do you-
seeing the autopsies I've attended of murder victims. Like you do have to just take some time and pause before you go back to your family life and engage. And that's trauma too, right, Mark?
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of
Huge.
police officers that end up
Yes.
drinking too much or drugging
Absolutely.
because of the things they witnessed because of their career.
Now, let me ask you this: Did you do you have any residual trauma symptoms from all of this, or some people sort of don't, but I would say the vast majority of people that I work with do.
The moment.
Steve, he's trying to get you as a client. That's what
Yeah, we're trying to.
I'll give you my insurance card. I think it's good. Yes, there are moments where I think I'm fine, and then all of a sudden something will happen. I'll see something on television, or there's a particular shooting or some type of crime that occurs, and I remember our memories are built in our brain, and sometimes we hide them or we try to hide them. But a current event will occur. It could be something in a newspaper, something on TV. There are certain movies I tell my wife, just turn that off. Just turn it off. Like, I don't want to deal with that because it triggers a memory from the past. And by the way, alcohol and drugs, it can soothe that memory for a while, for a temporary period of time. And then, boom, it comes back. So one way that we cope as police officers and first responders is what I call just peer support, just good friends, not a friend that drags you to a bar to get over some traumatic incident that you saw, but friends that are able to just sit around and talk about it and let you know everything's okay. The child that was murdered is not your child, Steve. This is a terrible tragedy, but it doesn't mean it will happen at home. To your loved one.
Do you guys have specific groups like in AA and NA? You go to groups. There's Al-Anon and Nar-Anon and all that kind of stuff. Are there specific groups that do help you guys deal with the trauma?
Well, we resisted them for many years.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure you did.
Because it's just, we have this idea that we're there to solve problems, but we don't have our own. And I can handle myself.
Yeah.
Law enforcement, various public service agencies are opening up more to sort of being trauma informed. And that peer support model is actually taught for police departments. We engage in that as well to make sure that human resources and leadership in agencies, when there's something that tragic occurs or something occurs over the course of time that's just, really eats at people, that there's a ability for peer support to come in. I would rather listen to, when I was back on the job, not a psychiatrist or psychologist. I'd rather listen to somebody who walked in my shoes, at least initially. If I needed further help, that's fine. But somebody who walked in my shoes and didn't end up drinking themselves to death or drugging to overcome the trauma. I wanted to hear from my peers that dealt with things I dealt with, but did it in a positive way and won in the end.
Because there's the old, I know the old way was that you would worry about appearing soft, right, as a cop or firefighter.
Yeah, right.
So,
that would be a tough guy,
Oh, yeah, I've talked to a lot. Much better than me, but I've talked to a lot of people in law enforcement that there is that kind of like, you don't want to look soft. You want to look like you've got it together with this stuff. And there's fear of it getting out that you're affected. And so that whole culture, I guess, needs to change.
It does. It needs to adjust slightly. There's a job that men and women in law enforcement have to do, whether they feel like it or not, or whether it's going to injure them emotionally or not. They have to run towards the sound of gunfire. And so, however, the whole culture of law enforcement has an opportunity, right, to change and to be able to debrief about these extraordinary experiences that people have and cope with this in positive ways, right? It's much better to go for a run than go for a drink. And so we know that, right? We know that, but it's important to support that with first responders and military people.
1-888-728-9941 is our number. We're here with Steve Forzato, and Steve is he's educating us today too, isn't he?
Absolutely.
On sex trafficking, opioid addiction, all kinds of stuff. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
This is Clean and Sober Radio.
A cancer diagnosis can knock the wind out of you. The Sidney Kimmel Cancer Center at Abington Jefferson Health can help. Our brand new Asplund Cancer Pavilion brings you 86,000 square feet of cancer-fighting science for truly comprehensive care. Backed by the strength of an NCI-designated cancer center. Call 1-800-JEFF now. The Sidney Kimmel Cancer Center at Abington Jefferson Health. The power to out-science cancer.
Hi, I'm Billy J. Kramer, and I listen to Clean and Sober Radio.
888-728-9941. This is Clean and Sober Radio.
Hey, we're back, Clean and Sober Radio. You know that drop from Billy J. Kramer? So he's a guy that all his hits were written by John Lennon. And we had him on. Were you with me when we had him on the show?
I think I was.
I think you were.
Yes.
I think you were. Very interesting guy. He sounds like he's dead, but I know he's alive, you know.
Well, I'm glad to hear he's alive and kicking, right?
He was very interesting. He would tell me that when he would open up for the Rolling Stones, that Mick Jagger would call him a fatso. I mean, you know how stuff sticks in your head? You're 80 years old now, and you're still thinking about somebody calling you fatso.
And wasn't he? He was in England, I think, when he was talking to us, wasn't he?
No, he's British.
Okay.
He was in upstate New York.
Upstate New York.
New York. So we're with Steve Forzato, and Steve and I got together, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years ago. I was introduced to him, and I'm still not. It was at some event that the Attorney General's office was putting on at some, I don't know if it was a church or recreational center, and I remember Steve and his crew had a big trunk of all sorts of drugs. They would show the public what these drugs look like. And I think you said to me, Steve, keep your hands out of this or something. I don't know.
I mean, he's even busted somebody in this very parking lot.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but guess what?
Yeah.
He didn't bust me.
You never got him. And
No.
I was young.
clean. I was clean, man.
Yeah. So when I did the sort of road show, I used to show the real drugs and not the simulated ones because I wanted the impact of
Who wants to see
particularly parents and others. But I always had my handcuffs on. Now, remember, I was undercover for 33 years. So, I had handcuffs, but I didn't carry them when I was buying dope,
Yeah, right.
So, that wouldn't have gone over well.
But when I did those road shows and people like Gary would come up to the trunk, and ask for just, hey, let me take a look. Like I would show my handcuffs and say, you can take a look, but your hand touches. These go on.
Did you ever have anybody try to steal them?
No.
Okay. I mean, stranger things have happened.
Well, sure.
One time, one of the ways we did our cases is we would pose as dealers, right?
Yeah.
And I got involved in this Quaalude, a group of people selling Quaaludes from New York to Florida and everywhere else, right? It was a really fun case.
Tony.
Really interesting people. Tony Randazzo really enjoyed that. And but anyway, when the case was done and I learned about this incredible market for Quaaludes, my partner and I wrote to a company in Sweden where they made real Quaaludes, and we got a DEA license for 1 day and imported about 3,000 Quaalude pills to show prospective large-scale buyers that we had the product, and they would gather their money and try to buy from us, and then we'd make the arrest. So we did the reversal operations.
Was that Roar Pharmaceutical? Was it Lemon
I mean,
Pharmaceutical?
could you imagine this guy? He would be a dirty cop.
Yeah. When he heard about
no
this,
good question.
he was very excited that
Was
we
he?
had 3,000 pills.
Listen,
I mean,
you're probably right. Okay.
the pot's calling the kettle.
Yeah, I
gray,
know
right?
that.
But
I know that.
I mean,
it's
yeah.
I know some of the people I went to high school with that he arrested.
And you know what I've always been curious about?
What?
Is if I'm a big drug dealer, I'm going to want anybody I'm involved with to be using the product. How did you get by that?
Yeah. So.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
That's
okay.
good.
Yeah, the undercover role. So I have
Yes.
secrets, Mark, that I can't reveal.
Oh,
but listen, working undercover, you're simply a human being who's skilled at conversation. You know, most of the time it's I didn't carry a gun. It's your mouth is the weapon, right? You don't want to introduce a gun to a drug dealer all the time, you know, because it can raise the level of concern and violence. And so the weapon was what we say. And so skilled undercovers are really good at talking, you know, and that's what we did. So yeah, there were times people would say they put a line of coke out
Yeah,
on the
say,
table
"Hey,
and say,
man."
"Do a line,
Yeah.
do a line," and then I would come up with my real excuses. They weren't simple ones.
Allergies?
They were complex. No, about my legal status and you know
yeah.
all those. Like, I won't give you the secrets, but now if somebody held a gun to my head, I'd do that line in a second. I mean, you know, but that never got to that point. I do have colleagues that did have to use.
That's an
under threat
interesting
of
question,
violence.
man.
Great question.
Yeah.
I mean, I would.
What would you have done, Mark?
I would try to. I probably would have used the darn stuff, but you know, fake. I guess you would fake it.
Yeah, you
I
could
heard some
simulate
people-
some things.
Yeah. He's not going to tell. He's not.
He's
You're not going to
yeah,
get it
I can
out
tell,
of him.
Tony.
So we had a lot of overdoses at the Philadelphia Folk Festival one year, and the following year they asked us to come and work undercover. So we camped out for a weekend. Oh, it was just a wonderful weekend. And I remember we were trying to find the source of supply for the heroin, which was causing the overdoses in the tents. And so anybody that was either smoking a joint or doing a line, like I would just befriend them to try to think, you know, how, you know, do you know where I can cop some dope? And so one guy was smoking a joint. He was being actually thrown out. So I walked with him from his campsite to the gate where he was being thrown out, and he's passing me a joint. I really did, Mark, simulate smoking marijuana, okay? I remember the wetness of his joint, you know, on my lips.
Oh.
And it sort of disgusted me. But I wanted to get information from him before he got kicked off the campground. And sure enough, he led us to, you know, where we were getting some cocaine and some heroin being sold.
See, if I was the guy, I would have said, "Yo, bro, how come there's no smoke coming out of your mouth?"
I mean, or puff it like Bill Clinton, right? Bill Clinton, he did inhale.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be legal, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Hey, we got a couple more emails. Real quick. Phil D from Dallas, Texas. I'm so worried that it seems like certain illegal drugs are getting more and more deadly. When will this madness end? Nobody knows, right?
yeah, I mean, I just keep praying for this whole opioid thing to pass.
Well, it'll
Even
pass
dealing
'cause
with other drugs,
It'll be
you know.
something else.
Yeah.
It's getting worse.
Worse.
It's the pollutants, the drugs that are being put into the drug supply, the heroin supply, and then replacing the heroin supply are even more
Xylazine.
xylazine and a host of others, actually.
Yeah.
And they are absolutely, heroin users, you know, could live for 30, 40 years in the past. Nowadays, you could barely find heroin on the streets of Philadelphia.
Yeah,
I'd
that's
be
right.
interested in what happens in Florida and Georgia and your other areas, but I could tell you in the Pennsylvania area, it's not easy to find a bag of pure heroin. In fact, it's almost impossible. And so you're getting these more dangerous drugs. Yeah.
Steve, can you give that number out again,
Sure.
please?
Yeah, it's 1-888-292-1919. That will get you to a PASIC operator, a Pennsylvania Crime Intelligence Center operator, where you can report criminal activity of all sorts, terrorism, crime, but especially human trafficking. And we're going to be working together to really promote some human trafficking education at hotels, motels, and other places, and get tips to that phone number from staff that see the red flags of human trafficking activity.
Again, your work is so important, Steve. We all thank you for all that you do. And Steve is also a really fun guy.
He really is.
You know that?
I mean, Steve's a very fun guy.
He's a good guy.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks again for coming on the show. And we got a platform here, okay? Remember, if you or a loved one is struggling with addiction, help is available. Please call 1-800-662-HELP. That's 1-800-662-HELP. For Clean and Sober Radio, I'm Gary Hendler.
I'm Mark Sigmund.
Thank you all for joining us. Thanks for all the support, and we'll catch you later.
Who will rain and chase the dust away? Everybody wants
I'd like to say thank you on behalf of the group and ourselves. I hope we pass the auditioning.
If
thanks everybody for joining us. Have a safe, wonderful week ahead, and we'll catch you next week.